At Seoul Medical Hospital, two names were on everyone's lips, Dr. KIMTAEHYUNG and Dr. Lee Y/N. Both renowned for their brilliance in surgery, they were not only the top surgeons but also fierce rivals. Their journey had started years ago when they were medical students at the same university, constantly pushing each other to be better, though that push often translated into fierce competition. Now, as senior surgeons in one of the country's best hospitals, their rivalry had only intensified. From the moment they met in med school, they had been destined to clash. Both were brilliant, quick-witted, and naturally talented. Y/N was known for her precision in surgery and her compassionate bedside manner, while Taehyung had a sharp, intuitive understanding of medical procedures that seemed almost instinctive. While others admired them, Y/N and Taehyung only saw each other as obstacles. Later that day, Y/N was in the middle of a complex heart surgery, her focus unbreakable. The procedure was delicate, requiring every ounce of her concentration. Her hands moved with precision as she navigated through the patient's chest cavity, her mind blocking out all distractions. Just as she was about to finish, the OR doors swung open, and in walked Taehyung. "Dr. Lee," he said, his voice smooth but dripping with arrogance. "I heard you're performing a cardiac bypass." Y/N clenched her jaw but didn't look up. "I'm in the middle of it, Dr. Kim. Do you mind?" "I just thought I'd observe," he said, stepping closer to the surgical table. "You know, in case you need a second opinion." The tension in the room skyrocketed. Y/N's hands remained steady, but her irritation was palpable. The other surgical staff exchanged uneasy glances, fully aware of the dynamic between the two surgeons. "I don't need a second opinion," Y/N replied tersely. "But thank you for your concern." Taehyung folded his arms across his chest, his eyes never leaving the surgical field. "It's just that your technique is interesting. Not the one I would have chosen, but interesting nonetheless." Y/N shot him a glare through her mask. "I've been using this technique for years. It's been very successful." Taehyung shrugged casually, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "I'm sure it has been for you. But there are always better ways to approach surgery, wouldn't you agree?" Y/N's irritation flared, but she kept her composure. "Perhaps you should focus on your own surgeries, Dr. Kim, instead of hovering over mine." Taehyung smirked. "I'm just here to help." As soon as the surgery was complete, Y/N ripped off her gloves and stormed out of the OR, fuming. Taehyung followed her, an amused grin on his face. "Why do you always have to undermine me?" Y/N snapped, spinning around to face him in the hallway. Taehyung raised an eyebrow, leaning casually against the wall. "Undermine you? I'm simply offering my expertise." Y/N scoffed. "You're impossible. And you're stubborn," Taehyung countered. "You refuse to admit that I might have a point." "Because you never do," Y/N retorted. Their argument was cut short by the arrival of Dr. Kong, who had clearly had enough. "Enough, you too." Dr. Kong barked, glaring at them both. "This is exactly what I was talking about. You're both brilliant surgeons, but if you don't stop acting like children, I will separate you for good." Y/N and Taehyung fell silent, knowing they had pushed their luck too far this time. "Dr. Lee, Dr. Kim," Dr. Kong continued, his tone exasperated. "I'm giving you one last chance. This hospital cannot afford to lose either of you, but your constant bickering is affecting the staff. Get it together, or there will be consequences." With that, Dr. Kong stormed off, leaving the two surgeons standing in tense silence. As days passed, the rivalry between Y/N and Taehyung continued, but now, something else began to brew beneath the surface. Their sharp words and pointed glares seemed to carry an underlying tension, one that neither of them could quite put their finger on. Late one night, after a particularly grueling surgery, Y/N found herself alone in the break room, sipping on a cup of coffee. She was exhausted, both mentally and physically. Her thoughts wandered, and despite herself, they landed on Taehyung. Why did he always get under her skin so easily? Why did his opinion matter so much to her? She was so deep in thought that she didn't notice Taehyung enter the room. "You're still here?" he asked, his voice startling her. Y/N looked up, surprised to see him. "I could ask you the same thing." Taehyung shrugged, grabbing a cup of coffee for himself. "I had a long surgery. Needed a break." They stood in silence for a moment, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, Taehyung spoke, his voice softer than usual. "You know, you're a brilliant surgeon, Y/N." Y/N blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected compliment. "What?" "I'm serious," Taehyung said, meeting her gaze. "We might argue a lot, but that doesn't mean I don't respect your skills." Y/N didn't know what to say. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of something other than rivalry in his eyes. Something that looked almost genuine. Before she could respond, Taehyung smirked, breaking the tension. "But don't let that go to your head." Y/N rolled her eyes, her usual irritation returning. "You're impossible." Taehyung chuckled, taking a sip of his coffee. "And you're still stubborn." But as they stood there, sharing a rare moment of peace, Y/N couldn't help but wonder if there was more to their rivalry than she had realized. Perhaps, beneath all the competition and animosity, something else was waiting to be discovered. Something neither of them had been willing to acknowledge until now. It was another late evening in the hospital. The glow of the surgical wing was dimmed, most of the staff having already left, except for Y/N and Taehyung, as usual. Y/N was sitting in the break room, reviewing some files when Taehyung strolled in, casually leaning against the doorframe, eyes locked on her. "You missed a spot," he teased, motioning toward the surgical notes she was working on. Y/N rolled her eyes, a smirk tugging at her lips. "Oh, really?" "Because I distinctly remember saving the patient's life." "Perhaps you missed the part where I fixed your mistake." Taehyung's brow arched, and he stepped closer, that familiar competitive fire lighting his gaze. "Mistake?" "I never make mistakes," he said, taking a seat across from her. Y/N chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Right. You're perfect." "My bad." There was a moment of silence between them, the usual playful banter hanging in the air. But today, something felt different. The tension wasn't just about competition, there was an underlying current they had both been ignoring for too long. "Why do we keep doing this?" Y/N asked suddenly, her voice softer than usual. Taehyung blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean?" "Competing. Bickering. I mean, we've been at this since med school, but..." She trailed off, not sure how to put her feelings into words. Taehyung leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he considered her words. "Maybe it's because you bring out the worst in me." Y/N's heart skipped a beat, a mix of emotions stirring inside her. "Or maybe I bring out the best," she challenged, her gaze meeting his. Taehyung was silent for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. His usual cocky demeanor faded as he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his eyes locked on hers. "Maybe, it's something else." The room seemed to shrink, the space between them suddenly feeling much smaller. Y/N felt her pulse quicken as Taehyung's intense gaze held hers. "You know, we've been rivals for so long," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "But maybe we've been avoiding something that's been right in front of us this whole time." Y/N swallowed hard, her throat dry. "And what's that?" Taehyung's lips curled into a soft smile, different from the usual teasing grin. This was genuine. "I think I've been in love with you for a while now. But I was too stubborn to admit it." Y/N's heart raced. She had always felt something, buried beneath their constant bickering, but hearing him say it out loud was overwhelming. She hesitated, then smiled, her own stubbornness finally giving way. "I think I love you too, Taehyung." Y/N's heart raced. She had always felt something, buried beneath their constant bickering, but hearing him say it out loud was overwhelming. She hesitated, then smiled, her own stubbornness finally giving way. "I think I love you too, Taehyung." For the first time, there was no teasing between them, no sarcastic remarks or competition. just the raw, undeniable truth. Taehyung stood, walking around the table until he was standing in front of her. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his, pulling her up to stand with him. "Then what are we waiting for?" he whispered, leaning in close, his forehead resting against hers. Y/N closed her eyes, her heart swelling with a warmth she hadn't realized she was missing. "I guess we're not waiting anymore," she replied softly. Taehyung tilted her chin up gently, his lips brushing against hers in a soft, delicate kiss. It was slow, careful, like they were both afraid to break the fragile moment between them. When they finally pulled away, Taehyung smiled. "But we should keep this a secret," he whispered. "Wouldn't want Dr. Kong losing his mind over this too." Y/N laughed, nodding in agreement. "Definitely. I can't imagine his reaction." As they shared another smile, the playful teasing between them remained. They were still the same Y/N and Taehyung, rivals, competitors, but now there was something more between them. Something deeper. And even though their relationship had changed, their dynamic hadn't. The teasing continued, only now, it was laced with the warmth of something much stronger than rivalry. Later, in the Taehyung caught Y/N's eye across the table, giving her a subtle wink. She smirked back, knowing that their secret was safe, for now. Even though they had confessed their feelings, the playful banter that defined them wasn't going anywhere. But now, every challenge, every teasing remark, was filled with a shared understanding, a love that had always been there, just hidden beneath the surface. 5 months had passed since Y/N and Taehyung had secretly started dating. Despite their relationship growing deeper, their teasing and competitive dynamic had only intensified, much to the confusion of their colleagues at Seoul Hospital. They were frequently caught calling each other sweetheart in sarcastic tones, all while playfully bickering in front of staff. It wasn't unusual for Taehyung to stroll into Y/N's office, leaning against the doorframe with a mischievous grin, and loudly call out, "Good morning, sweetheart. Late on the charts again?" Y/N would roll her eyes and counter, "Oh, stop worrying about me, sweetheart. You should focus on not botching your next surgery." Their colleagues, not privy to the truth, exchanged confused glances. How could two surgeons who seemed at odds all the time use pet names like sweetheart? The confusion only grew when it became clear that Y/N and Taehyung were living together. Their shared rides to work, whispered conversations, and inside jokes made no sense to the staff. Outside of the hospital, Y/N and Taehyung's life was full of joy. They spent weekends exploring the city, going on dates that ranged from fancy restaurants to casual strolls in the park. They loved to sneak off to a secluded cafe, where they'd spend hours laughing about the day's happenings or teasing each other over coffee. Taehyung loved to surprise Y/N with impromptu dates. He'd text her in the middle of a busy hospital day with something like, "Be ready at 8. I'm taking you somewhere." Y/N would pretend to be annoyed but always ended up eagerly anticipating the evening, knowing that with him, every date was an adventure. "Sweetheart, you sure you want to double-check that?" Taehyung teased, leaning against the doorframe of Y/N's office as she reviewed a patient file. Y/N glanced up, a smirk playing on her lips. "Sweetheart, I'm just making sure you didn't mess anything up." "Mess up? Me? Never." Their banter was endless, lightening up even the most stressful days. But amidst their fun, there were changes happening in the hospital. The biggest one hit them like a wave when the news about Dr. Kang's resignation spread. Dr. Kang, the hospital's chief surgeon, had decided to step down. It was unexpected. When Y/N and Taehyung bumped into him near his office, he revealed his reason. "I've got personal issues that need my attention," Dr. Kang explained, his expression soft yet tired. "My family, my health. I can't focus on my duties here the way I need to." Dr. Kang gave them a weary smile before leaving the hospital that evening, leaving behind a strange emptiness. Word quickly spread around the hospital that the board would soon pick a new chief surgeon, and naturally, the staff was divided over who it would be, Y/N or Taehyung. As the day wore on, the hospital buzzed with bets and whispers about who would take Dr. Kang's place. Some nurses backed Y/N, admiring her precision and dedication. Others rooted for Taehyung, charmed by his confidence and innovative techniques. The competition between them had always been fierce, but this new challenge put their relationship to the test. As the day wore on, the hospital buzzed with bets and whispers about who would take Dr. Kang's place. Some nurses backed Y/N, admiring her precision and dedication. Others rooted for Taehyung, charmed by his confidence and innovative techniques. The competition between them had always been fierce, but this new challenge put their relationship to the test. Taehyung sat on the edge of her desk, arms folded. "I have news," he said slowly. Y/N's heart skipped a beat. The tone of his voice was serious, and it unnerved her. "News? What kind of news?" He sighed dramatically, a mischievous gleam in his eyes. "You know, this whole chief surgeon thing is starting to get out of hand. People are betting on us." Y/N rolled her eyes. "Let them. Does it really matter who they pick? You or me, we'll still manage." Taehyung shook his head, his voice lowering. "It's going to complicate things, Y/N. One of us is going to end up bossing the other around. I think it might be better if we end things now before it gets messy." Y/N froze. "What?" Her heart dropped into her stomach, and she stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you say that?" Taehyung shrugged, his face a mask of seriousness, though a smile threatened to break through. "Come on, Y/N, think about it. The tension, the competition, it'll only get worse if one of us gets the promotion." Y/N's eyes narrowed. "What? Taehyung, are you serious? You want to break up because of a job, just to keep things between us easy?"